Hi and welcome again to the Beginner's Guide course. So this lesson will provide you with more information about the Design tab. So we will see an example of how to use commonly used design elements, and this will hopefully give you a good foundation of how to design apps using Bubble. So without wasting any time, let's get started with this lesson. So we are back again inside our app, and you'll notice that the Design tab actually has two subtabs, being the UI Builder as well as the Responsive tab. But we'll look into the Responsive tab in a later lesson. But for this example, we will be building a form using some commonly used design elements, such as drop-downs, input fields, multi-input fields, buttons, and so forth. So in order to start from scratch, let's currently delete what we had before. So to start, we'd like to add an input field to the page. And we can do that by scrolling down and selecting input. So an input field basically allows a user to insert some data that you'd like to capture. So after adding the input field, we'd like to name it name and change the placeholder to name as well. This way, it's easier for the user to know that they are supposed to input their name in this field. So let's now add another input field for the surname. And we can do that by clicking on Ctrl D for Windows or Command D on Mac in order to duplicate the input field. Then we can change this name to surname and also change the placeholder to surname as well. So before adding another input field, I'd like to show you that each input field has a content format. And by that, I'm referring to this drop-down over here that says content format. So with this drop-down, you can basically specify the type of content that this input field can hold, such as text, email, password, integers, decimals, or addresses, and so forth. So because now we'd like to capture the name and surname, we can simply leave it as text. But for now, let's input another input field. And this time around, this one will be to capture an email. And each time we'd like to capture an email, it's always wise to change the content format to email. Now, another design element that we can add is a drop-down. So we can basically click and drag that here. And just for example, we can make this drop-down basically allow the user to select his or her gender. So we can name this drop-down as gender. And then we'd like to add some choices that the user can select. So let's first add female and then add male. This way, each time the user selects on the drop-down, he or she will see those two options. And another input field we can add is a multi-line input. So basically, this input allows the user to input some data that's usually longer than one sentence. So for this multi-input, we can name it as message and change the placeholder to message as well. Then lastly, we can allow the user to submit the form by clicking on a button. So to do that, we can insert the button visual element. And then we can rename this button as submit. So just as a quick tip, when you rename an element within this field, it will automatically change the text here. So that way you're also renaming the element so that it's easier to see, especially when you're using workflows. So now that we've done building the form, we can actually preview this page by clicking on preview. And just like that, we have built this contact form. So a user can basically insert their name, the surname, their email, and also choose the agenda as well as insert the message. Then lastly, they can click on submit. And another thing that we can change is the text by the button. So let's change the text style by going to the button. And then we can click edit style. So here you'll notice that we're in the Styles tab. So any changes that we make here will basically apply to any button that has the primary button style. So if you go to the Design tab, you can see that the style is set to primary button. But for the purpose of this video, we'll just remove the style to show you exactly how it will look when we apply the changes. So perhaps we can change the font style to another one. Let's try Open Sans. And you'll realize that each font has different weights. So we'll click the regular weight. And then we can also change the font size. We can click 18. Or we can make it bold or italic, or underline it. So perhaps you can change the color to the blue and then change the background to a darker shade of blue. So basically these are the settings that you would play around with in order to change the style of a particular element. So we'll just go back to our previous style. And then let's keep it as a blue button. Another thing that we can change is perhaps the background color. So in order to do that, just double click on the page and then the property editor will pop up. And then here you can see that the background style is currently set to none. So we can change it to a flat color and then let's change it to this purple. And we can click to preview. And this is how it will look. But sometimes you'll find that the actual width of the page does not span across the whole screen. What do I mean by that? Well, what we see now is what I'm referring to. You can see that the actual page width does not span across the whole page, and it leaves us with white borders on each side. So oftentimes this happens when the actual page width is currently fixed. What do I mean by that? Well, when you go to the property editor of the actual page and you go to the Layout tab, you'll see that our width is set to 1000 and the container layout is currently fixed. So to change that, you can click a container layout which is not fixed, for example, align to parent. And when we click to preview, you can see that the background now spans across the whole screen. And we can also go back to our previous color. So this was just a basic walkthrough of how to use the Design tab in order to build a simple form. But another important aspect of design is responsiveness. For example, you can see that this form is not responsive because it does not resize when the window is minimized. And that will lead to a bad user experience. So in the next lesson, we'll learn how to build responsive designs so that your app can be accessed on any device regardless of its screen size. So all that and more will be discussed in the next lesson.